Welcome to NFL World when NFL starts and ends. I'm your host, Jacob. And this was shocking news as on Wednesday, Steve Wilks was let go. And there's a couple reasons that need to be addressed. For starters, did he lose you the Super Bowl if you're the 49ers? The answer is no, he didn't. The blitzes were ill-timed. They were getting pressure on Mahomes with their front four. Why did they decide they were going to blitz on third down? They couldn't stop him on fourth down and 1. So it's like, I get it. But Steve Wilks didn't deserve to be fired because of that. His defense gave up 26 points. Okay. What happened to that offense in the third quarter, only scoring 3 points? What happened? You didn't run the ball in the third quarter. You have the league's leading rusher, and you said, I'm not running the ball. I'm sorry? You got the league's leading rusher and led the league in touchdowns, and Christian McCaffrey, we're not handing him the ball. Makes no sense. Now, I understand the Chiefs' defense made some adjustments, but you still got to run the football. Can you blame Steve Wilks on that? What about the blocked extra point? Can you blame Steve Wilks on that? You can't. What about the holding call early in the game when Mahomes threw the ball to George Kittle? Can you blame him on that? No. These are things that happen during the course of the game, but we're blaming Steve Wilks got scapegoated, in my opinion. Like, what else could the guy have done? He was getting pressure with your front four. Chase Young was having a heck of a game. Nick Bosa was impactful. Eric Armstead was flying off the screen every time you looked up. He was making another play. To the point that Jim Nantz was calling him the blueprint over and over and over again. Which I do feel was very catchy and well deserved by Eric Armstead. He's a very underrated player. I do think the Drake Greenlaw injury didn't help, but it didn't affect the game. The issue with all of this, and the best way I can put it, is did Steve Wilks cost you the game? The answer is no, but you're acting like he did. Kyle Shanahan said in a press conference, I expected to have all my coaches back this year. And he was including Steve Wilks. How could you include Steve Wilks when you made the decision, or the upstairs made the decision, but you were tasked to carry it out to fire Steve Wilks? That made no sense. But there was some interest by this, I think. The intriguing thing about this is, first off, where is Steve Wilks going to go? Is he going to take a year off? Is he going to go and take a lesser role? Because there's no salary cap for hiring coaches. There's an unlimited amount of jobs. You can just make up jobs. That's all you have to do. You could legit have a guy be the assistant to the assistant of a position. You can do that. You just got to make the thing up. Remember, they didn't do these senior advisor roles. Now they do that all the time. Which, that's all it is. We never heard a lot about quality control coach. Now we hear that all the time. These are just roles that you can name and make up as you go along. So what is Steve Wilks going to do? is he going to do something like that? Because to my knowledge, there is no job open. So unless the job is created, he may just either go to the college ranks or take a year off and say, okay, I'm going to get another job. Besides the 49er job, which he's not going to go back. That's it. Now, I say this with sincerity. Are we sure Kyle Shanahan is the guy that can get you over the hump and win a Super Bowl? He gets you there. He gets you there. 2 times in 5 years, he's gotten you there. That's pretty good. But in each Super Bowl, he's had a lead. He's lost both. The first one, you can say, well, they didn't really have a quarterback. But we brought in Brock Purdy. He looks capable to do it, and he's been the best quarterback as he made it to the furthest that any NFC quarterback made it. We brought in Christian McCaffrey last year. He's a good running back. He led the league in rushing and touchdowns. We have George Kittle. We have Deebo Samuel. We have Brandon Ayuk, who Ayuk has said or been set on his Instagram and various other social media sites that he's expressed frustration what his role was in the Super Bowl, which I understand. I get you're frustrated you didn't win. But that would have been a whole different conversation if they would have won. He would have been okay with it because they won. That's obvious. But are we sure that Kyle Shanahan can just get you over? That's a question we need to have. And if it would have been any coach, we've destroyed McCarthy, Tomlin, Belichick, Reed in some cases, with clock management, with the inability to win the big game. And yet, Kyle Shanahan has a lead in either the middle of the game or late in the game and is unable to bring his team to victory. It's just a thought. I also don't believe in the fact they didn't know the overtime stuff because that's not on Steve Wilks either. That's on you. That's the head coach's job, which, again, we would destroy Belichick, we would destroy Reed, we would destroy McCarthy, we would destroy Tomlin, and all the other coaches. Why aren't we doing that here? That's a question. That's the true lingering question, is why aren't we talking more about what Kyle Shanahan didn't do instead of why Steve Wilks is no longer there? Because the reasons don't make sense for Steve Wilks not being there. And the answer to my question, I think Steve Wilks is going to take some time off. A lot of them do. Just, it's so unfortunate. He's such a good coach. He got fired after a season in Arizona. He's the interim coach at the Panthers. They start winning games. He was not retained, which I thought he should have had that job. He created that identity of let's run the football. We can't throw it, so let's run it. And that's what they did, and they won games. Wasn't pretty, but they won. And they believed in him. He gets the 49er D coordinator job. And when I first heard that he got that, I was like, holy cow, he's good. That's the rich get richer. Because Saleh became a head coach, but was the DC there. D'Amico Ryan was their DC, became a head coach. Now Steve Wilks, former head coach, briefly, now DC. I will make note, this was said, that Saleh and D'Amico Ryan hires were all internal. This was an external hire. And a lot of people who are in tune with the 49er organization said they had Steve Wilks learn the 49er terminology, or the Shanahan terminology of defense, and then he could sprinkle in what he wanted to do during the course of the year. That also makes it hard on the coach. And then you have injuries. These are unforeseen circumstances that, as a coach, I'm thinking I can bring in my own philosophy, and now I have to learn all their terminology. And then injuries you can't prevent. So those are my comments on the Steve Wilks firing. Next up, the Cowboys have a new defensive coordinator, an old familiar face, as they bring in Mike Zimmer. Now, the nicknames of this duo of Mike McCarthy, Mike Zimmer, I've seen Eminem, I've seen Mike and Zim, which Big Mike and Zim, I've seen that. I'm either with Get to the Mic, which is something it's being shopped in my head at the moment, or Get the Mics, something of that nature, because, and my comment on this is very simple. Zimmer, yes, he's been around, he's 67 years old, but he's a good coach. And is he stubborn? Sure. Is he a jerk? Possibly. I'm going to curse here. Is he an asshole? Yes. But you need that. You need that. Mike Fisher, who covers the Cowboys SI, but saying how, think of Dan Quinn in terms of a person as an uncle. Someone you would want at your wedding, someone you would want at family events. He could get you to a certain point, but he couldn't get you over the threshold. Bringing in a Mike Zimmer, who is more of a drill sergeant, his goal is to get you over that threshold. Like he said, I'm not here to reinvent the wheel. We're going to do the things that they do well and fix the things they don't do so well. That's what he said. But they asked Mike Zimmer, how do you plan to handle this? And he said, well, I haven't talked to the guys yet. Before I can give you an answer, I have to talk to them. But there was something that was revealed, that both Anthony Barr and Danielle Hunter got into contact with Michael Parsons and said, look, Zim's a great coach. Trust in what he's going to do. And of all the candidates, I thought Zimmer was the best hire that you could have gotten out of that pack. It took longer. There was a little concern of what was going on, what happened. We don't know what it was. And honestly, I don't care what it is. I like what Mike Zimmer brings. He's showcased that he can run multiple defenses, but he brings a certain fire. This Cowboy team, and I'm being completely truthful here, this Cowboy team brings, at times, like, I describe it like this. When I was in high school, we had the boys and girls high school basketball teams. And the boys' team was really good. They were getting into playoffs, but there was only like 8 teams in this conference. So basically everyone made the playoffs. The girls' team was not so good. They just everyone was fairly short. When I'm nearly a similar height, I'm 5'7", almost 5'8", and when the tallest girl of the team is maybe an inch taller than I am, that's nothing to be impressed about. That's terrible. You're just not going to win, especially when you had people who on the other teams that were way taller than you were. You were just not going to win. But that's not the point. The point I was trying to make, they would get down in a game by 2 points, 3 points, 5 points. Baskets and they're back in it. The one basket, they're back in it. They're down by 2 or 3 points. And everyone would have their hands like this, like, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart. And I was like, in my head, I couldn't say this, but in my head, I was saying to myself that it's only 5 points. That's an issue. If you're losing it because you're down 5 points or less, and you're saying, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart, it's kind of like you're not mentally prepared for this. Someone's got to be willing to light a fire underneath you guys. That's what Mike Zimmer's gonna do. This Cowboys team, you saw this game against the Packers in the wildcard game. They're down 14 and everyone's looking up like as if they just were deer in headlights. Like you're only down 14. It's okay. Just you can't allow it to get to you. Okay, you're down 7. All right, don't let it get to you. And yet they would. Mike Zimmer is not going to allow that to happen. Okay, yeah, you gave up a touchdown on the opening drive. So what? Let's go and fix it, and let's go and move on. And that's what they do. Where Dan Quinn won't necessarily do that. Or wouldn't necessarily do that. Different style of coaches, both respected coaches, but different styles. I think Zimmer's going to bring that kind of intensity, that kind of fire, and make a way more tough and physical football team. Now, the franchise tag and transition tag window will be open on Tuesday. What does these things mean? Well, everyone knows what the franchise tag is. Basically, if you can't play a player, you can put the franchise tag on him. The franchise tag is the top 5 or top 8 DNs, and you get a median of the market. So, for an example, the highest paid running back, which was Christian McCaffrey, when he signed that contract, the franchise tag was $10 million for the running backs. Even though the market underneath that was like $6 million. Miles Sanders was paid $6 million a year for 4 years. Where Christian McCaffrey was making almost 20. But the median was 10. For like a player like Chris Jones' caliber, that's $30 million is Aaron Donald. the franchise tag is about, I want to say 22, 23 million. The franchise tag. It's a lot of money. But because the cap bump that we're getting every year, those franchise tags go up. So, for an example, there's the franchise tags are not actually going to be 25 or 30 or whatever. They're going to be higher than that because they're going to try and make sure the franchise tag, is at a certain level for a long time. That way they don't have to keep adjusting it as they go along. So it's going to bring a lot of either teams that have to really cap crunch and make moves that they don't want to make, or guys are going to have to take less money, which they aren't going to do. I am all for the players to go get their money. But I'll give you a good example. L'Jarius Sneed said, I don't know, I'm hoping, but I don't see a way that the Chiefs can keep me and Chris Jones. Now, you say that, well, what is a corner going to make? It's top 5, top 8, something like that. All the top 5 players are making $19 million or more dollars. And there's like a tie for like 5 with like 3 spots. So you're paying a guy roughly $20 million to play corner. And more than that, if you franchise tag. Chris Jones, you're paying 30 plus. So that's $50 million that you got to pay. Along with the cap hit. Because the cap hits aren't the same. Like for an example, Mahomes is making I think it's $44 million or $50 million. But the cap hit's 58. But he's only making this much money. We excuse the fact of, okay, yes, that's his salary. Yes, that's his bonus. He's making $45 million. And with incentives, probably $50 million. Which is more money than we'll ever see in a lifetime. But the cap hit's 58. His cap hit is $58 million this year. Meaning they either have to renegotiate a new contract with him to get his cap hit lower, or they're stuck. Because what I just named, Chris Jones, let's say Chris Jones gets $32 million. No, let's go with 35. $35 million. Then you get Sneed, let's say $20 million, to be fair, $20 million. And Mahomes' cap hit is 54. You have to pay the cap. So let's say the cap hit of Chris Jones is 20 million of his 35. And the cap hit of L'Jarius Sneed is 14 or 10 million. So you get 84 million through 3 players. You still got to fill out 50 other people, 50 other players on this roster, which is a younger roster on the defensive side. You still got to pay them. I just spent nearly $100 million on 3 players. So that's where the franchise tag can get you in trouble at times. Now, why is this important? Mike Tannenbaum, who works for ESPN, went and interviewed with the legendary Dan Patrick on the Dan Patrick Show. And he said, the best way you do it is you go to both guys and you say, guys, we can't pay you A+ money. We can get you a B+ contract, but someone else has to take the tag. Well, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Because L'Jarius Sneed, I believe this is his first contract negotiation. His second contract, I mean. He's going to want the most money he can get. Chris Jones is, I think, 32 years old, if I remember correctly. How many more years is he going to play and be this effective? He's going to want to get as much money as he can get. That's just logical. You got to make moves with the other guys you have. That doesn't help the situation because you still got to pay the other guys. And even if you don't pay them, there's a cap hit that you still got to pay. So you could pay 3 guys, but your cap hit's $100 million, and they're only making 80. That's how it works. That's why when we say we gotta pay the cap, it's not paying the player necessarily; it's paying the cap. Like, I'll use an example. Dak Prescott's gonna look for a contract extension, and the Cowboys have to go and talk to him. His cap hit's $58 million. $59 million. He's only getting paid about $35 million, but the cap hit's 59 because they've restructured so many times. The cap hit is now at 59 million. Now they could restructure again. They could, but that would push him over the $60 million threshold where they can't tag him because of they put that in his contract. They cannot tag him. They have to pay him. They have to renegotiate. They can't do that. They have to bring his cap hit down, which means you got to pay him more money on a new contract and break the cap hit down. So he may get paid $60 million next year, but his cap hit's going to say $32 million or something like that. That's what it's going to do. But they're going to break it apart. That's what the Chiefs have to do with Mahomes. That's what all these owners have to do with their star-studded players. Now, I will make note with the transition tag. Okay, there's the franchise tag. There's the transition tag. They don't work the same way. Various things. There's also another tag that is the non-exclusive tag. That one's a little more complicated. Basically, it's not the franchise tag, but you tag him, but he can still talk to other teams. If they make that move, then they have to trade for him, and it costs like I think 2 number ones. But he can negotiate. It's very complicated. But yes, that starts tomorrow. To finish off, we got 3 things of note. Thing number 1 is now that Jimmy Johnson is in the Ring of Honor, or the Cowboys Ring of Honor, he is now more involved, more in the involvement of things. And that could be such a thing like he has a say in what happens, but he can just say, hey, Jerry, this is how I would do it. Doesn't mean Jerry Jones has to listen, just this is what I do. The next thing is there's a report that came out that it's less likely, or it's more likely that Mike Evans and Chris Jones will become free agents as the franchise tag number is higher. like Mike Evans, I think would be 28 million. Or yeah, 28 or 31 million dollars. It's a lot of money. That are you willing to pay that for a 30-plus-year-old wide receiver? Chris Jones, very similar. Are you willing to do that for a 30-plus-year-old D lineman who is, yes, one of the best in the game and is a 3-time Super Bowl champion, but are you willing to pay him that kind of money? Knowing we still have to pay 50 other guys their money. And the last thing, this is very unfortunate for the family of Steve McMichael. Steve McMichael, who has ALS, was hospitalized last week with an infection. He had to have kinds of blood transfusions and all that terrible stuff for you. But the good news is he is starting to feel better. He's starting to get better, which is good news. When you have a disease like ALS, what is affectionately known as Lou Gehrig's disease, where you basically just get trapped in your own body as your body turns against you. Infections happen a lot. The good news is Steve McMichael is feeling better. He had double pneumonia about 5 months ago, and he came out of that okay. Now he's starting to feel better from an infection, and that's starting to turn around. So good news from the Steve McMichael family, which big prayers to them and their family as Steve continues to fight through ALS. For NFL World, I'm Jacob Hebert. Out.